It's wonderful to be with you. It's even wonderful to be with Trent.
By the way, I've been calling these two the grumpy old men over there.
Teresa calls us the grumpy old men. Who you calling old? It's great to be with you. It's a real pleasure to be with you today, and I very much appreciate the invitation. I have the honor and privilege of serving as your Secretary of State, and I'm respectfully asking for your vote for re-election in the primary on May 10, or early as you wish. The Secretary of State has a whole wide range of responsibilities, and I'll come back to elections because the Secretary of State is the chief election officer of the state. You're probably aware of that. But there are a whole other range of responsibilities. The Secretary of State, for example, is the keeper of the Great Seal of the state of Nebraska. Did you know that? And this is serious business because there's a painting in the Secretary of State's office that depicts the Great Seal of the state being moved from Omaha to Lincoln. When the territorial capital was moved from Omaha to Lincoln, there were people in Omaha who were not happy with that decision. And the seal had to be spirited away in the dead of night in a hay wagon and taken across the Platte to Lincoln. And there's a painting in the Secretary of State. So I've stopped by and have a look at it. And there in glass is the original state seal of the state. I'm not as worried about it now because people in Omaha have calmed down. They seem to be okay now. And there are 3 lanes on the interstate, so they're fine. The Secretary of State issues truth and deception licenses. Did you know this? So apparently, Trent, if you want to engage in deception, you got to get a license from me. But this is for polygraph operators and voice stress analysts. And there's an advisory committee, but it's the Secretary of State who issues these licenses. The chair of the Nebraska Real Estate Commission, the chair of the Debt Collection Licensing Board, a member of the chair of the Nebraska State Records Board, which is the state entity that contracts with the internet provider that the state uses, nebraska.gov. There's a whole raft of responsibilities there that you don't think of. Here's one that's kind of intriguing and interesting. The Secretary of State has the statutory responsibility to promote international trade, international commerce, on behalf of the citizens of the state of Nebraska, and to promote international educational and cultural exchanges in coordination with the governor. So that's a way that the Secretary of State uses the status of the office to increase the top line of the state's economy. And of course, we have $8 or $10 billion a year in exports, and 85 or 90% of it is ag or ag-related. It's ag commodities, it's value-added agriculture, it's ag technology. So 85 or 90% of those $8 or $10 billion worth of exports is ag-related. Well, so I've led trade missions now, internationally, with the purpose of marketing not only agriculture but our other state businesses. And in 2019, I took a trade mission to Bulgaria to sell dry edible beans. Why? Because Bulgarians consume dry beans every day. It's a staple of their diet. It's on their supper table every day because it is high in digestible protein and it's low in cost. Bulgaria is kind of a poor country. Well, but they only grow 10% of what they consume. They import the other 90%. Wow. Well, in western Nebraska, we're the foremost growers of dry edible beans in the country. We're the #1 grower of Great Northerns, and we're in the top 5 of the other dry edible bean varieties. All of the national dry bean processors in the United States are headquartered in western Nebraska. This seems like, so this is a way where we can expand our market, where I could use the status of the Secretary of State's office to expand that market. Now there's a problem, and that is that the EU, of which Bulgaria is a member, had a 25% retaliatory tariff on American ag products. This made us price uncompetitive. That tariff has been lifted. We're going back to Bulgaria. We're going back to Bulgaria at the end of June, and we built relationships in 2019, but now we're going to go reconnect with those we built the relationships with and see if we can't make some sales. This is one of the responsibilities, statutory responsibilities, of the Secretary of State of Nebraska. And it's something that you can tell really piques my imagination as well. Well, so let's talk about elections for a couple of minutes. Nebraska's elections are fair, safe, and secure. Now, I want to tell you, but we have to constantly be vigilant about that. And so there are some things that happened in the legislature this session. There were bills passed that I asked to have written. For example, have you heard of Zuckerbucks? Do you know what I mean by Zuckerbucks? This is private money used to fund election operations inside counties. And I learned that Lancaster County accepted $404,000 in Zuckerbucks. This is a bad deal. It's bad policy. It's a bad idea. Puts a thumb on the scale. That money has been deployed selectively across the country, a couple of $1 billion selectively across the country to put a thumb on the scale, and it wasn't to advantage left-wing candidates across the country. We can't have this. We cannot have private money in funding our election operations. So I asked to have a bill drafted, and it was, and now it's been passed and signed by the governor to prohibit Zuckerbucks in Nebraska. We're not going to have that anymore. There's another bill that will better secure ballot collection boxes. Ballot collection boxes present a problem because it is an entry point for ballot harvesting. We can't have that. So the ballot collection box security bill that I asked to have drafted also was passed. It isn't everything that I wanted, but it's a very good first step. And it immediately resulted in Lancaster County removing a whole raft of ballot collection boxes that they had that could not meet the new security requirements. And ballot collection boxes were put in place primarily for COVID. COVID is over. Did you know that? We declared COVID over. And we don't need them anymore. So as far as I'm concerned, we don't need them at all. That's a hard sell. It's up to the counties whether they have them or not. But at least we now have a state law that secures them better, and that's a first step. There are other things that need to happen in order to further secure our elections. For example, voter ID. There is a petition now that you can sign to put voter ID on the ballot. If that petition is successful, it'll go on the ballot, and I have no doubt that it'll pass. We could not get it through the unicameral. We tried for years. And so I floated the idea, why don't we have an initiative? Now, I'm not part of that initiative because the Secretary of State has to make the judgment about whether to put it on the ballot or not. So I can't be part of the initiative itself. But there it is, and I've supported voter ID for years. To me, it's just common sense. You're told that it's controversial. It's not controversial. It's been polled for the last 20 years. It's constantly supported by 70 to 80% of Americans, including minorities, because no one wants their vote to be canceled out by someone who cast a ballot who wasn't entitled to do so. No one wants that. You're told that it suppresses ballots, it suppresses voting. It does not suppress voting. There's no evidence that it suppresses voting, and there's plenty of evidence that it does not. But in Nebraska, the guy asked to have this evaluated. In Nebraska, 98% of Nebraskans who are eligible to register to vote already have state-issued photo IDs. 98% of Nebraskans who are eligible to register to vote already have state-issued photo IDs. If we had an ID requirement, it's only 2% of people who are eligible to register if they wish. And we can, that's a manageable number. We can figure out what the roadblock is and get it out of the way for them. So we need voter ID. I had a bill in to prohibit ballot harvesting. This is where people bring hundreds of ballots and throw them in the ballot collection boxes. It's one of the ways they put them in. That's also a bad deal because it's very abusive how they get those ballots and how they select which ballots they're going to actually put in. It's very abusive, and it needs to. There's a bill that I asked to have drafted that makes it a felony to do that. I couldn't get it to move. Couldn't get it through the government committee. I'm not giving up on that. We've got to prohibit that. That's a very bad practice. It's a bad policy to permit it, and it's important that we keep moving on that legislation. Depends on who we get in the unicameral. It's so important who we put in the unicameral. So that's another one we have. There was a bill to shorten the period of early balloting from 35 days to 22 days. That's something that I also supported, but it didn't go anywhere. You know, you have all these things that unfold in campaigns, and you have all these people who've already, we have tens of thousands of people who've already voted, and it happens every time. People will come in and say, can I get my ballot back? I'd like to just get my ballot back. And no, once you cast your ballot, it's done. But the campaigns continue to go, information continues to come out. It's a bad deal to have it go that long. We need to shorten up that period of time. So those are some of the things that, some of the initiatives that I've been working on. We've had success with prohibiting Zuckerbucks. We've had success with securing ballot collection boxes better. We need voter ID, and we need the other items that I was talking about. The last one in that respect I'm going to talk about is winner take all. Winner take all, you know, we split up our electoral votes by congressional district. So Donald Trump won the state of Nebraska by 182,000 votes, and yet we sent an electoral vote to his opponent. That's crazy. 48 other states don't do that. There's only one other state that does that. It's Maine. 40 other states have winner take all. We're playing by a different set of rules than 48 other states. That's nuts. It dilutes our impact. And there are a number of other bad effects of it that I could go on about that one for a while. So that's the last thing looking forward. We almost had it. We had winner take all until about 20 years ago or so. We almost got it back. We were one vote short. We need to get there again. Once again, it's so important who we send to the unicameral. Now, what about the security of our elections? Okay, so here are some things. ES&S is not owned by the Russians. The claim is that ES&S is owned by the Russians. ES&S is owned by Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy has 80% of ES&S. How many of you have heard of Mike McCarthy? He's a huge investor in Omaha businesses and has been for decades. The other 20% of the company is owned by the senior management of ES&S. When the claim was surfaced that ES&S is owned by the Russians, I ran that to ground. Well, who does own ES&S? And that's what I learned. I've run everything else to ground that's been brought to me, and many things that were never brought to me. None of this stuff pans out. It isn't like we didn't see this coming. Our machines are designed, our whole process is designed not to be connected to the internet. Our ballot counting machines are not connected to the internet, and the ballot counting machines are monitored by representatives, Republican and Democrat observers. The computers that compile the results are never connected to the internet either. It's only then that data is put on an encrypted flash drive and moved to a computer that does upload it to the internet, and the results are checked every step of the way. We know what the results are from the machine, the ballot counting machine, because there's a paper printout done of every run. We know that the printout's good because before every election, every single ballot counting machine in our state has 3 test decks run through it to make sure that it's counting correctly. We run 2 mock elections where they take the ballot counting results, they compile it with the computers that aren't connected to the internet, then they take it to the second computer that is and upload it, and it is checked to make sure that it's accurate every step of the way. We do that before every single election. So we aren't just sitting around wondering. Our whole system is designed that way. And our system is secure. No one has brought forth evidence to me that shows that it's other than that. There's lots of speculation. There's lots of talk. I've run it all to ground that's been brought to me and a lot that hasn't. And it just doesn't pan out. My job is to look into it for you. And that's what I've done. So with that, I'll answer a question or two because I'm sure I took too much time. I do go on.
Just wondering about the voter ID.
Yeah.
You instead of collecting signatures?
Right.
Do you have a website or something?
So the question is there a website for collecting signatures for voter ID? I don't know. I don't know, I'm sorry. I have to separate myself from that process of signature collection, and I just don't know. I'll see if I can figure that out, and I'll get that information to you. Teresa.
You can go down to the Douglas County Election Commissioner and pick up signature sheets if you want to collect signatures. If you want people to sign. Oh, okay. So there isn't a website. You need to sign one of the signature sheets because they have to be notarized before we turn them back in. Go to the Douglas County Republican Party office, which is next door to Don Bacon's. They have to. Okay, well,
If you go to the Douglas County Election Commissioner's office, you can get a petition, but the petitions have to be signed in the presence of a notary. You have to physically sign the petition has to be physically signed by you in the presence of a notary.
So call Nora, Sandy. She'll have them.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for your service to our state. First and foremost. So, talking to voters, this is obviously a huge issue that they are talking to us about. And one thing, I didn't see it in this packet, so why not just get rid of mail-in ballots and keep absentee ballots? So, do you think that would eliminate a lot of confusion? Yeah.
All right. First of all, on your tables is a document called Fake versus Fact. This is a printout of what's on the Secretary of State's website. It shows some of the main points that have been raised. Fake versus fact. You can go on sos.nebraska.gov, look for fake versus fact, and you can see it there. And there are also some copies on your tables, which you're welcome to take. The question was, why don't we just get rid of early voting and just have absentee voting?
Yeah, and mail-in ballots, so we don't have drop boxes and stuff like that.
Well, okay, that's the second question. Why don't we have mail-in ballots instead of drop boxes? We could get rid of the drop boxes. Right now the presence of drop boxes is a decision that's made by each county. Each county can have them if they want them. I'm a little reluctant to say, well, okay, so each county can have them if they want them. If as a state we think it's bad policy to have them, we can get rid of them. In my view, that would not impair voting at all. You can always take your ballot in and hand it in to the election commissioner. You can go into the election commissioner's office and actually vote there. You could put your ballots in the mail. And by the way, when you mail in your ballot, you can track them online. Did you know that?
Yeah.
You can track them on the Secretary of State's website. You go in and put some personal information about yourself so we know it's you. And you can see, was the ballot sent to you? Was the ballot received back? Was the ballot validated? In other words, it was established as valid. You can check the progress of your early ballot on the Secretary of State's website. If you wanted to get rid of early voting, that's a legislative change. We didn't have it before. We had absentee voting, which means you have to have a reason. And I will tell you that in 1972, we didn't have early voting. We had absentee voting. You had to send in a letter to your election commissioner, election commission, say why you couldn't come to the polls. If you gave a good enough reason, they'd allow you to vote early. By absentee, you have to vote absentee in front of a notary public who certifies that it was you. And then the notary sends it in. That's the way it worked. And we set a record for participation in 1972, in the 1972 primary, Nebraska state primary. We set a record for participation in terms of the number of people who cast ballots that was not broken until 2020. That record stood for however many years that is. That's 48 years.